Epstein is not going to be a win for anyone, okay? Not the pod bros who lied and overpromised, not the fringe fanatics who lined up with their empty binders, not even for the president, okay? And look, this Wall Street Journal article that just came out, this is a big swing and a big miss. Now, he's saying he never wrote a letter to Epstein. He didn't do it. He's going to sue, whatever. That's Trump. But, you know, he was wrong to call people who believed that there would be a release of information, that there would be transparency, that there would be justice, that there would be a pin put in this balloon that elevates the rich and the powerful and the connected above everybody else. And they're upset and disappointed, and they should be, and he does need them, and they are not weak to feel deceived, okay? Now, look, I don't really care about the game of what and who is worse in all this. I believe that the majority of us are not about this story, or really any of the distractions. We are waiting for better, for reason to believe that better is possible, let alone likely. So this isn't just about what the right is doing wrong. The left is making a mistake going all in on this Epstein BS. You did nothing to release any information about this case on your watch, okay? And you watched a woman go down for Epstein's crimes and did nothing to add to any sense of accountability for anybody else then. So going all in now is obvious and gratuitous and ugly, okay? And look, I get the play. This is bad for Trump, so we got to be all in there. You need to give the majority reason to believe that you would be better, not that just he is worse. Do you understand? That's the key. Not MAGA sucks, okay? Not that they lied to you, MAGA, so vote for us, because MAGA was formed in part out of desperation for feeling that you on the left lie and don't deliver. So this battle of attrition is just going to create two losers. My suggestion is be less about your opponent and more about restoring opportunity, less about who is woke and more about who is broke. And there is good news tonight, my brothers and sisters. This is really doable. In fact, I would argue that the majority in this country is desperate for a reason to believe in something better because the problems that we're facing right now are not new. The grievance, the disappearance of affordability of daily life, let alone dream life. None of it is new. What is new or different is that the obstacles have grown bigger and more onerous than the way around them, through them, and past them to a better future. But as is often the case, as the Stoics teach us, the obstacle can become the way, meaning that the problem, the challenge, these obstacles, these opportunity blockers, that they provide a path to giving the majority a reason to believe that something is better by leaning into what's wrong, the inadequacies of the current system, and then do what is not being done now, that is not part of the game. Instead of just seeking the dead end of blame and division, have solutions. Ideas for what would make it better. Not just that what blames it on somebody else, nothing magical that will make it go away, no kind of suggestion that we're going to be something that we are fundamentally not. I speak about this with fluency because I've seen it done. In fact, almost to the day, some 40 years ago, Democrats showed they knew exactly how to do this and what the right message was. And the message then is only more relevant today. Anyone on the left, either a member of what used to be the Democratic Party, which I don't think exists anymore, or anyone who just believes there has to be a better way than this two-party game, should watch Mario Cuomo's keynote speech from the 1984 Democratic National Convention in full. It is worth it. He was a real one who was able to marry pragmatism with populism. He called himself a progressive pragmatic. He didn't call himself a liberal. He didn't even call himself a Democrat. He was a Democrat. But that party isn't what today's party is. In 40 plus years since he gave this speech, a period that is greater than the lifespan of the people motivating the current populist movements, if you think about it. The problems are the same then as now, just worse. Take a listen.
President Reagan admitted that although some people in this country seem to be doing well nowadays, others were unhappy, even worried. The president said that he didn't understand that fear. He said, "Why, this country is a shining city on a hill." But there's another city. There's another part to the shining city. The part where some people can't pay their mortgages, and most young people can't afford one, where students can't afford the education they need, and middle-class parents watch the dreams they hold for their children evaporate. Mr. President, you ought to know that this nation is more a tale of two cities than it is just a shining city on a hill.
You know, he's younger than I when he gave that speech. Amazing, huh? Everything he is saying there is just as true today. It is exactly what we're dealing with right now. Why? Because this struggle has been the same in America from her inception, in terms of how to get as much as we can to as many as we can, as fairly as we can. Now, I would argue to you, we've all but forgot the last part of fairness. It's never been easy. It's never been close to perfect. Frankly, it has rarely even been enough. But that's why it's called an experiment. Pop knew this. And that's why I dismiss this idea that the Democrats need to wait for a transcendent messenger. Trump didn't create MAGA. He took advantage of what he saw going on in this country. Same with Obama, same with Clinton. Yes, I'm totally biased, but I believe as a speaker, a philosopher, an arguer, a policy person, a leader, my father was a different universe from the leaders on the left today. AOC and Bernie versus Mario Cuomo. I mean, it's a joke. It's a joke. It's literally like a Ferrari versus a Yugo, or, you know, a Fiat. It's gotten cheap. It's gotten obvious. It's gotten ugly, because that's what the game has become. They're not about great ideas. They're about being radical and provocative. It's not about the man. It's about the message. The country was a tale of two cities then, and it's even more so now. In fact, I would argue that you need to extend the metaphor, Pop, and say that today it's not almost like a tale of two cities. It's like a tale of two different countries with the different versions of reality we see in America. At the time of Pop's speech, the wealth gap was real, and it was actually getting worse. Take a look at it. Take a look at the screen. The top 1% earned 12% of the country's income. The bottom 50% earned 20%. Now, the top 1% earns 20%, and the bottom earns just 12%. You see what I'm saying? Same dynamic. It's just gotten worse. And affording the American dream has become increasingly unattainable. So let's look at it in today's dollars, okay? Median incomes are down, but the home prices have nearly doubled. Car prices, more than double. Cost of college, nearly triple. Look, the problems were the same, and so were the solutions. They were within our grasp. But did you hear my father damning the rich? This guy was bust-ass broke. He grew up in South Jamaica, Queens, a Depression baby. Hated elitism. He knew they looked down on him, saw him as less than, called him gap-toothed, swarthy, dismissed him as an ethnic. But do you hear him calling Reagan Hitler? Do you hear him saying that capitalism is bad? That Reagan's a jerk? No cheap tricks. Because he had ideas. He had imagery. He could capture your imagination. He could give people reason to believe in something better, not just beat you over the head with the other side being worse. Listen to what he said the solution was then.
We must answer our opponents' polished and appealing rhetoric with a more telling reasonableness and rationality. We must win this case on the merits. We must get the American public to look past the glitter beyond the showmanship, to the reality, the hard substance of things. And we'll do it not so much with speeches that sound good as with speeches that are good and sound, not so much with speeches that will bring people to their feet as with speeches that will bring people to their senses. We must make the American people hear our tale of two cities.
Today, the MAGA folk and the Democrats just give you somebody to blame. Just want you angry. They don't want you reasonable because they have no reasonable solutions. The Democrats couldn't figure out how to enforce the law, and this administration hasn't even been able to release files. You see where the majority wants this country to be. We can do better than what ICE is doing right now. My father was very sensitive to the power and potential of immigrants, but he was also a law and order guy. He was this first generation born in this country. We don't need ICE to be under attack, for their families to be under attack, and we don't need them to be attacking communities. Who really believes you're going to deport everyone who's in this country who entered illegally? Really? It's an extreme answer because it's not meant to be a reasonable one. This administration is going to change its policy, okay? And it's going to change it because the extreme isn't going to get them through the midterms. They're going to have to move towards the majority, and the majority wants reasonable. And this has always been the case. It was the case back in the 1980s. And by the way, it's why, for all the glory of that great speech, Walter Mondale got his ass kicked in that election. Why? Because he wasn't able to give people a reason to believe him better. He barely won his home state, Minnesota. He lost every other one to Reagan. Reagan kicked his ass and then blew up our deficit and our debt with this trickle-down economic dream. But Pop was right then, and he's right now. What was different is that my father was trying to motivate the many, not just create a following for himself out of the fringy few. Oh, you've got 15 million followers. This is about swaying 200 million people. We have real problems in this country, and they are not new. What is new is that our leadership has gotten out of the business of convincing you they can make things better, and instead they're engaged in an ugly war of attrition, a battle to the bottom of which side is worse, and that has become enough, and it can't be. That's why everything's getting uglier. That's why nothing escapes the filter of which side is worse. That's why the Wall Street Journal says they've got a bombshell about the Epstein files, and they have nothing to do in this piece that they just put out with why the guy was either murdered or how we know it wasn't a murder, or anything about who the client list is, because I don't believe there is one, but that's not what it's about. And they have some stupid story about Trump writing a bawdy 50th birthday card to this guy. That's an investigative piece these days. Something that just makes the point that you already know that Trump was friends with this dirtbag. That's investigative reporting. The Epstein files would have never been a fascination like this 40 years ago. But today it crowds out almost everything else. We're living in a moment that is proof that we focus on the wrong things for the wrong reasons. And it doesn't have to be this way. It certainly doesn't have to stay this way. Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.